Welcome to Your Region This Week. I'm Anandi Carol Woolery. In this episode, I'll look at an organization that educates the community about healthy relationships and preventing gender-based violence through consent education. And the University of Waterloo marks Emancipation Day. But first, here's a look at the headlines. Public health officials confirm a horse in Wellington County has been infected with a mosquito-borne illness called Eastern Equine Encephalitis. The disease is carried by mosquitoes and poses little risk to humans, but severe cases can turn life-threatening. There is no risk of human-to-human transmission. Officials say there has never been a confirmed case in humans locally. Last year, a person in Ottawa died from complications from the disease. After years of controversy and months of community engagement, Wilmot councillors have voted to return all statues to the Prime Minister's path in Baden. The Mayor of Wilmot spoke to the Mike Farwell Show about the decision. Here's an excerpt from that interview.
There's the historical context before this council, of course, that the Prime Minister's path was brought to Wilmot, and there was a project scope there. And then the last council, of course, came to a decision after the paint being thrown on Sir John A. Macdonald to place the statues into storage. And they had done that on consultation that during the election, the now council has found people weren't super satisfied with the engagement, regardless of where their opinions lied. So this council, what we have done is we heard pretty loud and clear that people want this to come to a resolution. So we engaged, we did an RFP to reach out, find an organization that could come in and do public consultation, but not just consultation, but really help build the divide that our community saw after the events of the statues being removed. Laura was the successful consulting firm, and they formed a working group which was made up of residents of the Township of Wilmot with varying perspectives on the project as well as various different backgrounds. And they then brought forward in May the recommendations from over 10 months of community engagement. And then council last night, the whole time in the background, we have been hearing from residents and people outside of Wilmot as well of their perspectives too. And all of that fed into the final decision, which council unanimously made to move the project forward, but with quite a few, I think, thoughtful stipulations going forward to ensure respectful civic dialogue and that this becomes a meaningful project versus just a simple replacement of statues.
What role will council and township staff play in the management of this project moving forward?
So the motion was pretty clear in terms of their role would only be maintaining the park. And then, of course, like any community group, staff are there from an advisory perspective, but staff are by no means the ones running this. And then from a council perspective, there is also in the motion a report back structure. So from a public committee that council gets to decide who is on it, and it's application based. So from that, council has involvement, as well as there's a reporting back, I believe it's 4 times a year to council. But beyond that, it is going to be an arm's length, very much like in other communities you might see friends of whatever society or project. It'll very much be like that and run in its own structure with the mandate that council has provided in its most recent motion yesterday.
A local pet food supplier made a massive contribution to the Kitchener-Waterloo and Stratford-Perth Humane Society's Better Together capital campaign. Elmira Pet Products is giving out $100,000 in donations to help build a new community outreach center. With back to school on the horizon, Hope House in Guelph is helping those in need with its annual Community Bag Project. It provides kids with new bags, supplies and a special surprise from our friends at the Guelph Storm.
The Community Backpack Project, in 2023, we gave out 2,400 backpacks. In 2024, we distributed 2,700 backpacks. And this year, 2025, we're looking to distribute over 3,000 backpacks. The goal of the Backpack Project is to ensure that all kids in Guelph, from JK all the way until grade 12, have access to all the essential school supplies they need to be successful going into the new school year and to feel confident going into the new school year. So we're asking for empty backpacks, but also we're asking for the supplies that go in them as well. So we're open, we take anything, packs of pencil crayons, we take binders, notebooks, graph paper, line paper, anything that is sort of a staple school item that most kids would need going into the new school year. So they can donate to Hope House up until August 6th. We're accepting donations right here. And then the Guelph Storm up until August 4th is accepting donations of an empty backpack. And I believe they're giving out a free Guelph Storm ticket voucher to the Community Backpack Project game when you drop off a backpack at the Guelph Storm. And then there is other pickup locations, I believe at Mark Wilson's Better Use Cars is also a drop-off location. It's amazing. I think the support that we get from the community is wonderful, and you can see it at the pickups when the kids are coming and they're getting their new fully stocked backpack, and when they leave and then they get that Guelph Storm ticket voucher at the end. It's always a really positive experience for the families and for the kids, and it's something that is really nice to see when we have so many amazing organizations in Guelph that are willing to contribute, because the demand just keeps growing. We're seeing that year over year increase in the amount of children that are in need of these backpacks. So it's just wonderful to see everybody coming out to support it.
Coming up, some tips on keeping your pet safe during the dog days of summer. It's a trial that made headlines across the country. 5 former members of Canada's World Junior Hockey team acquitted of sexual assault charges that centered around a night in 2018 with a woman identified only as EM. The verdict has sparked conversation about consent. At sexual assault support centers, consent education is a crucial component of the work they do in preventing sexual violence. SASC provides education and resources on consent to promote healthy relationships and safe communities.
When you teach consent, but what a lot of people get out of it, again, comes down to this yes or no binary, it still becomes difficult. Harm still happens that kind of slips through the cracks because people will think like, I did consent to things, or that, a yes means a yes even if you change your mind and things like that. A lot of these myths can still kind of permeate and create harmful situations and understandings regardless of how much more prominent it has become. And that's why I think that, I don't think there is a point where we're talking about it necessarily too much. Almost regardless of, how much I've talked to it or gone in, how much these kids have heard about it when I'm in these classrooms, many of them still come out of it and they're like, yeah, I learned stuff, right? I learned more about how that works. I learned more about what it means to respect a friend's consent or when it's valuable. So yeah, I think that it needs to continue to be a core conversation because I think the more we talk about it and the more we normalize it, the more it challenges a lot of these really harmful kind of societal norms that contribute to harm, right? Things like locker room talk, and that kind of sexualizing behavior, and the amount of times I have to get called into schools because the principals and teachers are like, they won't stop being weird to each other in the hallways, right? Like and so it's always a conversation that needs to happen because there's always new people that need to learn about it. When conversations like this come up, for example, particularly around like the media, around like the Hockey Canada stuff, another prominent narrative that came out of it was this kind of like Him Too movement and some of the people that were there. And a lot of people hear about resources like ours and assume that, we are here for women, right? When we say survivors, they kind of hear women, and that's not necessarily their fault, because that is very often how things have been socialized. A lot of the same stuff that men get told their whole lives they have to strive to be also leads to a culture where men can't necessarily come forward and talk about this stuff. And so when we say like we believe survivors, when we support survivors, that means everybody who has been harmed. When people hear my position as a male allyship educator and I say, I talk to men and engage them in conversations around ending sexual and gender-based violence, a lot of people hear that and they go, oh, you think, all men are abusers. And I have to take it back and say, no, right? I don't think that's the case. I think that, as a man and talking to others, I see the harm that can come from a lot of these guys being kind of raised and socialized in a culture that tells them that violence and, sex and dominance are what matters from them, rather than, everything else that they can bring as a person. And, I talk to them about the harms from that and how it hurts everybody, including themselves, right? When they can't come forward, when they can't talk. And so it's important to recognize that, these conversations are happening and these conversations have to happen, and that we shouldn't use male survivors or anything like that as some kind of scapegoat to take away from the conversation around women, because the fact of the matter is it's still a very gendered issue. Sexual violence perpetration is like 90% plus of the time by men, even when the survivors on the other side are men as well. And so the conversation has to happen. We have to call in our friends. We have to talk to them about why those jokes aren't okay. But we also need to talk to them about, why do we feel the need to push people away? Why do we feel the need to make those jokes and cause that harm? And what do we get from that? And what is it doing to us? And how can we challenge that? Because when we challenge those norms, I think that's when a much bigger cultural shift can happen. And that's why I think it's important.
We all know leaving dogs in a hot car is illegal and could be deadly. But even walking our furry friends on a hot and humid day can lead to serious problems for our canine companions. We visited the Guelph Humane Society for some tips and tricks.
It's actually a little bit dangerous.
Why?
Because he has a hard time breathing when it's really hot out.
When it is really hot out, we want to avoid walking our dogs outside or be mindful about it, because dogs only have so much tolerance for the heat, just like us. So think about, if it is too hot outside for us, it is definitely too hot for our dogs. And so in those cases, we want to be considering activities that we can do inside to keep them enriched, or also just walking at cooler times like the morning and the evening, and trying to avoid that middle of the day where it is the peak hottest. So when you are considering whether or not to take your dog out, also keep in mind the breed. Certain breeds are more sensitive and more intolerant to heat. For example, brachycephalic breeds, those that have a squished face. So pugs, boxers, Boston Terriers, that kind of category. And it can actually be life-threatening when they are out in the heat for too long. As well, breeds like Huskies and Malamutes that have a really thick coat and a thick undercoat, they are less tolerant of the heat, and their coat actually does a good job of trying to keep them cool. So also good to remember that you don't want to shave their coat, because then you take away their ability to actually thermoregulate. Thanks, buddy. And a couple of extra tips too to judge if it is too hot, is when you're walking on the pavement with your dog, put your hand on the pavement, or if you're wearing sandals, put your foot on the pavement for just a moment, and it'll give you a sense of how hot that is for your dog's paws. So another tip is to just give your dog the leash freedom to walk on the grass, walk on the shadier side of the street, or walk on trails or other grassy areas just to avoid the hot pavement on those hot days. If your dog is showing any of the following signs, it might indicate that they are uncomfortable with the heat, too hot, experiencing heat stress. So